The shoemaking history in Lynn was so important, and it was so significant on a worldwide scale. My name is Sarah Guerin, and I'm a bootmaker. I grew up in Lynn in Swampscott, Massachusetts, and today I'm at the Lynn Museum, where I often talk about shoemaking and bootmaking and the history of footwear making in Lynn, which was globally significant, and how that relates to my practice today, where I work in my workshop in Wakefield, Mass. So the boots I make today are made exactly like the old shoes of old-fashioned times. A really hard, dense fibered leather will last for a really long time on cobblestones and paved streets, and then could be pulled off and repaired because the rest of the shoe remained intact because it was sewn to the insole. So it was this beautiful type of construction that was just deliberately done and formed in order to resole the shoes and put on heels, which were also made out of leather. When those processes started moving into factories and mechanized, that was too labor intensive. The work was too delicate and too skilled to translate into machine-made shoes. So one of the first changes was going from sewing the upper directly to a leather insole to gluing this little strip of fabric that was called gemming all around the insole and sewing into that instead. It was easier for machines to do that, and that was sort of the first step away from this historical construction that was more sustainable, because you could repair those shoes over and over again. And that trend continued to making all of the leather in a shoe, whether it's the structural pieces or the parts you see or the sole, started being replaced with synthetic options. So you started having plastics or glued heavy-duty pieces of fabric instead of leather. And now the leather that was a byproduct of the meat industry, more of it might end up in landfills. And it was really skilled knowledge that started to slowly disappear. You can break down shoemaking into 4 major categories, and women did the first 3, both in artisanal work and in factories, and men, shoemakers, would do the last part. The most complicated part in all of these processes is called lasting. It's this really complicated process that requires a lot of knowledge to do it by hand. And when you do it by hand, you do it with a lasting pincer. On a last, the heel height is set and the size. So you need 2 different lasts for a pair of shoes, and you need different lasts for every size you're making and every heel height you're making. And there was a race to the finish to invent a machine to do this. It was the final machine that had not been invented to mechanize that process and make that lasting process a little more streamlined. And the man who finally invented this machine that could last shoes, it was called the consolidated lasting machine, was a man named Jan Ernst Matzeliger here in Lynn. He was a black man who had immigrated here from Suriname, where his mother lived, and he invented it on his own in his spare time on weekends and nights in the back barn of friends of his. Not a single invention had an impact on shoemaking the way that this invention did, and it exploded the production of shoes, which made shoes more affordable to more people. People started buying more shoes. You could go from having 1 pair that you passed on among family members to having 8 or 9 pairs yourself. And it was just an enormously significant machine. When the craft of shoemaking started becoming more and more mechanized, and the architectural developments in buildings got more advanced, and really big, large-scale brick buildings started popping up everywhere, that work moved into these mill buildings and these factories, and that gendered labor still stayed pretty similar. Women were doing stitching on sewing machines, on uppers, and doing a lot of the shoemaking work, but it really was a system that took advantage of gender in order to make more money for the people at the top of the manufacturing chain. We have echoes of that today. We just exported that system to Asia and South America, where women still largely stitch the uppers of our shoes, of our sneakers, of our very disposable shoes, and are underpaid. And the most money just funnels up to the top, which is almost all males. My practice is really thinking about those issues and thinking of how we make a better tomorrow for ourselves, both in keeping these traditions alive, keeping craft alive, keeping that knowledge alive, but also being really deliberate about thinking about how our footwear is made and who is making it and what we're doing and what we're supporting when we buy inexpensive shoes. And I'm trying to get as many stories as I can from people that worked in shoe factories to understand what it was like, to hear what it was like to work on your machine or in that room, and how the company worked. So if anybody has any stories of working in shoemaking, and even if it wasn't you, if it was your aunt or your grandfather, please contact me, and I would love to record your stories and put it into a larger context that is part of all of our history here.
To support Greater Lynn Senior Services and see more videos like these, please consider making a donation at the link below and subscribe to our channel.